Well, hey, everybody, welcome back. This is Nathan. Hi, Nathan.
Hey, guys.
And I'm Scott. And we both work, in case you're wondering, at Christ Community Church. We work in particular with a ministry called Celebrate Recovery, among other things. And we hope that you find these videos interesting enough to pick up the various books that we talk about. In this case, the book we're looking at is called The Other Half of Church by Jim Wilder and Michael Hendricks. We really would love it if you are looking for a group, a recovery group in particular. Check us out. We're here almost every Monday night of the year, 7 o'clock. Currently, we're meeting in the chapel at Christ Community Church. You can join us. I say this all the time. I think I sound like a broken record, but if you're hearing it for the first time, I want you to hear it. You can join us any Monday night of the year. We would love to have you. Mm-hmm. By the way, Nathan leads our worship, and he has, in my opinion, an Elvis kind of voice. So his worship is very soothing and inspiring at the same time. So, Nathan, you don't have to comment on that, but that's just my opinion. What do I say about that? All right. But today, for just a few minutes, we are going to review chapter 7 of this book on, of all things, caught me off guard when I first saw it, narcissism. He calls it the relational infection. And I'll be honest, as I was reading through this on the 4 ingredients of a healthy soil that we've been working through as we've done these sessions, joy, hesed, group identity, and a healthy culture of correction. The next chapter, which is not technically one of the 4 soils, he talks about the enemy of healthy discipleship, which is narcissism. And at first I thought, narcissism, wonder why he is including that there, but you got to pick up the book, read this chapter, let us know what you think. But in short, he argues that narcissism will ruin the healthy ingredients of your discipleship. And let me just give a definition, and then Nathan, share your thoughts on what stood out to you about this chapter. He says, or again, I keep saying he, but it's 2 authors. They say people with narcissism lack empathy, which I think is so interesting because we hear so much in our culture today about empathy, especially as it relates to our EQs, our emotional quotient. Mm-hmm. So people with narcissism lack empathy, and they have a strong need for admiration, and they want to be the biggest personality in the room. And explain that a narcissist is someone who is unable to metabolize shame in a relational way. What do you think about that?
I actually love this chapter. I love the way he put it as well. I think that the word is a very emotional word. I think when you hear the word, there's kind of at least for me, I'm like a little cringeworthy. It just has a clashing sound to it. I think in terms of when, there are certain words that just immediately produce this emotional response, sort of like a discordant note. You're kind of like, ouch. I love the definition. Honestly, I think people when they look at lack empathy, have a strong need for admiration, want to be the biggest personality in the room, I think people could have a tendency to even misinterpret what some of those could be. I think there's different ways to look at it. I think, like something as simple as lacking empathy, I think people might simply interpret that as not caring. But I think it could mean you're not taking long enough to mirror what someone else might be going through, whether that could be a hard week, it could be a difficult season, it could be a joyful thing, but you're not you're kind of missing each other in the dark. It is relationally disconnected, I think. The same for a strong need for admiration. I think, we might say this and someone would say, oh, well, I don't care if I'm on the stage getting admiration, but it could also mean someone who might be codependent and they're really needy. They really need to come and hear as much as possible encouragement, someone asking them how they're doing, that they're so glad they're here, because they're really hungry for it, because they actually have a really strong shame factor going on the inside, right?
That's
even
right.
Even the biggest personality room, I stopped and thought, well, what about that one? Because that's literally saying biggest personality. I mean, I'm a big guy, but I think for me, what it means is, again, if you can be in a room and feel disconnected from everybody else in the crowd, that's saying, are you alone in the crowd? You've become the biggest personality in the room, because you're saying basically you're so isolated, you've pushed everyone outside of the mental or emotional boundaries next to you.
Yes.
So it may not be someone who's the outgoing charismatic. It may just be someone who's alone in the crowd that said, what I have going on is too big, or it's too much for me to allow anyone into my space.
Yes. And you said it very well, that inability to process or metabolize shame. I mean, think of it this way. Perhaps I was deeply hurt as a child or as a teenager, and I'm ashamed of that. And I believe the lie that I was a mistake, I am wrong, I am bad. Well, my narcissism could function to cover that up. I will seek to be the loudest voice in the room, or the biggest person in the room, because I don't want people to really see what's driving that underneath, because I'm ashamed of it.
Yeah, I mean, the picture that people have, when they think narcissist, at least for me, is someone's holding up a little mirror and they're looking at their face, right? And they're admiring their face.
Yes.
Now you might say, well, people are looking in the mirror and they're seeing more like not good things. At the same time, though, that's still a form of narcissism, because you're holding the mirror up and you're constantly looking at yourself. I think so. A few points would be: one, I think that it's an ultimate version of being isolated unto yourself. It is an individualistic, I am one and I don't need to be connected at all, which we've already said, God's made us. I mean, even neuroscience says our brains are meant to be relational. So I think that's one point. The next is, I think that's a version of pride. I think narcissism is a great word, but I think that this is kind of a pride word. And we often associate pride with that disconnection from God, don't we?
Yeah.
So that's how I think that we're really looking at narcissism this way, is not only I'm staring in the mirror and just admiring myself, but I'm just staring in the mirror unto myself. There's no one next to me.
Yeah, and to use your relational illustration, I do think it's possible for one person to say, I don't need to be connected to anybody else in this room. I also think the next person could come along, the next disconnected person, but what's underlying their message is, if we connect relationally, you may not like what you see. And therefore, I'm going to protect myself. Some would even say protect you from seeing the real me. And it's interesting, because that could come across in very similar ways to another person observing, because let's say the person is quiet because they don't want to connect with anybody. It could be pride. I don't need to connect with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be fear. If I connect with you, you may not like what you see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was another study that was talking about shame as well. Actually, it was about addiction. And it was relating the fact that when you're trying to face down your addiction, you actually end up giving it more power, which means that you're not ever able to overcome the addiction itself. I mean, it was in the Conquer series, but and it was relating the fact that you've made something so big that other things, even in terms of relationships, even God, is not being given control over something that is that size now. I mean, that's 5-second just point. But yeah. I think this is the same way, whether it's, look at me, I don't need the relationships. I can get through this on my own. Or I'm afraid that what you will find you won't like.
Yes.
Even that means you've made it more powerful than that person's ability to cross that boundary.
Right, which is narcissistic.
Right,
in a sense. A summary statement here on page 164. The authors say, "Let me state this again, because it gets to the center of the dysfunction being narcissism. Ministry, for the narcissist, ministry becomes more important than relationships." And he says, now we are finally looking at the soil and not just the symptoms, and a soil analysis reveals depleted hesed. So now he's tying them all back together. I may be in the midst of the group, but disconnected from the group. And we need to be careful, because that can lead me to narcissistic tendencies.
It's a super powerful statement, especially in light of COVID. If you've had great ministry going, COVID has paused it, and it feels like things have fallen apart. I think that this is a great thing to examine. Was your community built on joy and hesed, love, or was it just built on the sake of ministry, like information, left brain?
Well, speaking of that, we hope that you can join us for the next session, which wraps up the book. It's chapter 8, and it's called A Full-Brained Christianity.
Yeah. It's a great way to end.
Great way to end. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in again, and we'll wrap up this book the next time. Hopefully we'll see you on an upcoming Monday night.